Here is what we're going to do. I have been using this method quite a lot recently, and I think it does wonders for washed out images. And it works great to give your photos more saturation and contrast, especially on the skin. I have no clue if others use this, but I call it the blue negate punch method. So let's take a quick look how it works. We're just going to use two curves adjustments. Let me add the first curves adjustment from the layers panel. I'll switch to the blue channel and invert it. This adds blue to the shadows and removes the blue from the highlights. The absence of blue is yellow. So what we end up with is that we have now blue shadows and yellow highlights. Even though this looks pretty interesting, let's change the blend mode of the adjustment to luminosity. As we can see, this brightens up the image, but also adds more color, especially in the red and the green. The next step is to add the second curves adjustment to compensate for the added brightness. In this curves adjustment, we just need to slightly fix the starting point of the curve to start with the histogram. Optionally, we can also slightly adjust the ending point and the midpoint. And our effect is done. If we compare the before and the after, it definitely has more punch in the colors and contrast. It really punched the colors and the contrast. Pretty cool. These curves adjustments create a nice base and possibilities to play around with. First, we can also compensate for the extra brightness introduced from the first curve by also lowering the midpoint from the master, which gives us a much contrasty image. As this will darken the overall image, adding an exposure adjustment works quite well with this technique. Setting the exposure to 1 usually gives nice results. Here is the before and the after. Pretty nice. As mentioned, this method opens some other possibilities. I'll remove the current adjustment and start over by adding a curves adjustment. Let's invert the blue again and change the blend mode to luminosity. I'll duplicate the curves adjustment by pressing Command or Ctrl J. As expected, this makes the image even brighter. However, when we change the blend mode to soft light, we get this very nice warm color effect. I can go back to the first curves adjustment again and fine-tune the master curve to control the contrast, and if the image feels too bluish, we can go to the second curves adjustment in soft light and decrease the inversion power of the blue channel. Here is the before and the after. Not bad at all. Let's take it to the next level. I'll remove the existing adjustments and start over again. As you know by now, let's add the darkened inverted blue curve. We'll again add the second curve to compensate for the darkened areas. Now let's group the two curves adjustments and change the blend mode to soft light. Awesome! This worked very well in this image, but depending on the image, you might optionally go to the blend options and remove the effect from the shadows so the darker areas do not get too dark, and keep the details. Or you could do the opposite, exclude the effect from the highlights, giving the image really dark shadows and more contrast. As mentioned in the beginning of the video, I do use this method quite a lot, so I made some macros which I will be sharing in the InstaFilter 2025 macro library. Download link will be in the description, and as always, it's free. Now let's take a quick look at the macros. Number 6 is the grouped soft light, where the effect is applied to the highlights. Keep in mind that the curves adjustments do contain commonly values, and it might be necessary to modify them. As shown previously, an exposure adjustment works very well on top to give that extra pop. If the effect of the exposure is too much, you can adjust its blend range on the highlights. It's just amazing how these three layers can change an image. Here is an example where I will apply macro 7, which is the grouped curves in soft light, but this time affecting the shadows. I'll add the exposure adjustment again to brighten back the image. You can also stack the highlighted version by applying macro 6. The adjustments look pretty powerful, Especially the red and the green are really standing out, but the exposure is a bit too much on the highlights. So let's fix that by changing its blend range. If we remove the exposure on the highlights, we get the details back in the sky. Pretty awesome. I also added a fun macro which creates this pop art blue-purple duotone effect. It uses two inverted blue curves adjustments. Let me quickly share how it works. First, we add the inverted blue curve and use this in luminosity blend mode, which as we know by now brightens up the image. We'll make a duplicate of it and apply the hard mix blend mode for the duplicate to get the effect. And actually, we don't need the first curves adjustment for the effect, but because it brightens up the image, the duotone will contain more details if we enable it. Have fun with these macros, and I hope they will be as useful to you as it is for me. And don't forget that you can always adjust the curves adjustments for your image to get better results. As I demonstrated, you might want to add an exposure adjustment on top of the final effect to compensate for the loss of brightness. Macro 5 has an E variant which will add the exposure adjustment automatically. By the way, I forgot to mention, the shared macros will add the adjustment groups on top of the current layer. Even though the result of these macros are pretty strong in some cases, it does create really nice skin tones and definitely boosts green and red for that extra punch. I hope you liked this video and thanks again for tuning in. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons before you leave and see you in the next video.